But we can start. Okay. Good evening. Welcome to the September 13th meeting of the Town of Southampton Conservation Board. In accordance with the Town Board's adoption of local law number 14 of 2022, the board's meetings are being held both in person at Town Hall and via video conference through Zoom webinar. A link to participate in this meeting via video conference can be found on the town's website at the town clerk's agendas and meetings portal. You can also watch the live stream video and submit written comments for the public record through the town website. If you are attending via Zoom and wish to speak during this meeting, then please click the raise hand icon. As a reminder to all applicants, agents, and members of the public who wish to speak at this meeting, please state your name and hamlet of residence for the record. Thank you. I invite everyone to rise for the salute to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're going to delay the acceptance of the minutes until after Zeb arrives. I think we'll quorum then, but we'll check in at that time. Public hearings, A019131, Lynn Prue Revocable Trust. Kevin, is there someone on Zoom?
There's 0 people on Zoom.
You said there's someone?
There's no one on
There's
Zoom.
no one. Then let's just wait. And rather than do that one first, we'll do that hearing last. And we'll move to A021076, Nicholas Christopher and Penelope Christopher.
This is a new application. We do have affidavits of posting and mailing, so the board does have jurisdiction.
Thank you. And who is the agent?
Suffolk Environmental, add-on.
Okay. Would you like to present your application?
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Martha Reichert, Toomey Latham Shea, Kelly Dubin, and Cordovaro, 33 West 2nd Street, Riverhead, New York, for the property owners, Nicholas and Penelope Christopher. So this is a little bit of an unusual application in the sense that I don't have a set presentation for you. And Marty has written a very extensive preliminary report that details a lot of history that has happened with this application. Primarily the fact that this is the first time this is before the board since it issued a permit in 1999. And Harry, you might be the only one who was on the board from then, I think. Oh, George? All right, so Harry and George. So in 1999, the Christophers received a wetlands permit to build an extensive amount of improvements to the existing residence, which is a pre-existing non-conforming house that was built approximately in the 1930s. So I think where this comes into play is what the Christophers didn't build, which is they actually built their deck about 67% smaller than was originally applied for and approved by this board in 1999. And they didn't build any of the additions to the house. So what happened was in 1999, and again, George and Harry were there so they can speak to it a little bit better, it wasn't the practice of the board or the environment division to have certificates of wetland compliance at that point. So the Christophers built their decks. They essentially didn't build any of the other portions of the approved project. And through sort of a series of different things, which is mostly contentious neighbor relationships with the property to the north, they found themselves in justice court. And I have the owners here, Nicholas and Penelope Christopher, who can talk about that. But they found themselves in justice court over Was it the structure placed in the buffer that you were using to guide the
It
mooring?
was the cobblestones,
Okay.
the structure in the back.
Oh, sorry. Here, you can,
Oh, I'm sorry.
come on up.
I'm sorry.
All right, so I'm about to be joined by, sorry. I'm about to be joined by Nicholas Christopher, who is going to just sort of talk about the initial Justice Court matter, which is how this came back into sort of review by the Environment Division.
Okay. So we received 10 summonses. 5 of them dealt with the cobblestones we were given permission to put in by Mr. Masterson, who is Department of Highway Superintendent, and that was in 2009. Another one dealt with a shower head that was probably put in at the time the building was constructed and does not flow any water. I don't remember all of them, but in the back, because we had the buffer, we placed like a garden black barrier that you would put for a flower bed at the edge of the buffer, but not even in the ground, just on the surface of the buffer, so that if somebody mowed, they would know to stop there before they went in where they weren't supposed to go. That was one of them. Another one was the fact that we were mowing the remainder of that backyard. So that's 7 or 8. Do you remember the other 2? I don't remember them anymore, I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Okay.
So, but I had Nicholas discuss that with you, just to sort of bring into like the context of what we're dealing with here. And so, beginning in about 2010 or 11, the Christophers contacted Marty about some trees that had died, and so a dialogue began, in addition to this Justice Court matter issue to clear up. It was discovered, right, that the declaration had never been actually filed. It was signed back in the late 90s, but it was never filed with the Suffolk County Clerk's Office, so that was actually, it's been since filed as part of the original 1999 permit. But originally, so that was supposed to receive a CWC, it didn't. The Environment Division asked the property owners to bring an administrative permit application, which they did, to sort of deal with the fact, to quote unquote legalize the fact that they didn't build as big as they were supposed to. And to deal with the shower head. And Matt, do you have those photos submitted into the record? I think it would be helpful for you to see what we're talking about here. So the shower head is a pretty old, rusty-looking fixture that comes out of the back of their garage. It's non-functional. So I think we're legalizing its removal. And legalizing the fact that the deck is 60% smaller than what was originally approved in 1999. Through a series of different correspondences with the Environment Division, which is detailed in Marty's report, the Environment Division asked them to convert the administrative wetlands permit into a Conservation Board wetlands permit. And the Environment Division reflagged the wetlands boundary, which had sort of shown that the buffer was doing what it should. The wetlands vegetation was becoming reestablished, and the wetlands boundary line had actually migrated closer to the home and is now mostly located within the original buffer. So I think that, again, normally I come in to you guys with a very clear proposal of what we're seeking and what we would like this board to do. I think that for the purposes of this first public hearing, what we want to do is show you what has occurred and really determine what is an equitable and sort of global solution of all of the different issues. There is a covenant buffer pursuant to the 1999 approval that is now in place. The applicants, again, did not build the second-story additions and all of the decking that they were originally approved for. There is now a untreated wood and plastic children's play set that is within the footprint of the original decks that were approved. And my clients would very much like it to stay. They are, in 1999, I guess the practice, and again, Marty can speak to this, was only a 10-foot buffer was established from the wetlands boundary And the remaining wetlands on the site were not actually covenanted. So there is a pond. It's a very, very special property if you go and visit it. There's a pond that runs into a brook that's on an adjacent property. And they're willing to covenant that area as a wetlands preservation area and things that would be the normal practice of this board now. But I guess just said a couple minutes ago, we're here to sort of engage in a dialogue with this board over what would be an equitable and reasonable global solution for the various different issues that have been presented on this property. It's constrained by the wetlands, but again, they did not actually build the full extent of what they were permitted to do. And normally before, people come before this board to legalize overbuilding, right, past what you were permitted to build. And that's not the case here. So it's a little bit of an unusual legalization in that, you know, when the preliminary environmental report says that the applicants didn't build what they were permitted to build, they didn't actually overbuild, they underbuilt. So just want to see if the board has any comments now, or if you'd like Marty to go and sort of give his explanation of his review of this property.
I would like more to go in a moment, but I just want to list the things as I've heard them from you of what this application is about. You are interested in legalizing certain things in this property that have not built according to the previous permit. And one is removing the shower. Another is approving the sized deck. And I'm looking at the survey, and you're proposing French drains on both sides of the
We're
driveway.
proposing additional drainage mitigation. And my clients would very much like to be able to keep the play set that they have on the property right now. They have 4 young grandchildren, and it's within the footprint of the originally approved deck. And, you know, and they would, if nothing is to change, you know, with respect to building decks to what was approved, et cetera, then they also would like to not have an expanded buffer for the purpose, and there is a photograph that was submitted by Suffolk Environmental sort of showing visually how very little room and lawn there would be left to even walk around the perimeter of the building. Mr. Christopher was hospitalized for babesiosis a little over a year ago. And they don't apply any pesticides or fertilizers to the property, so while they're not killing the ticks, if they could at least have a fighting chance and have a little bit of short lawn and shorter grass in terms of what they already have, they would like to keep that as a health and safety reason.
I wouldn't put much faith on that to protect
Well,
the
you
health.
still have to do diligent checks, but it helps if the lawn is a little bit
Now,
shorter.
Tell me about the Belgian block curbs.
So the Belgian block curbing was installed by my clients. It's not on their property, it's in the highway right-of-way. And they do have a letter, which I'm happy to submit into the record, from Bill Masterson, the former highway superintendent, saying that he was fine with it, and basically if it's broken, it's up to you to fix it, the highway department isn't going to fix it. And the reason they put that in is that, as my dad always liked to say, gravity works. So when there's rain and runoff from Noyak Road, when you turn onto Maple Lane, it slopes down. And so what happens in that case is the Christophers found all of the runoff and garbage, litter, plastic, wrappers, bottles, ending up in their pond and then going into the wetland. And so when they installed that Belgian block curbing, it funneled the water down to the low point, where the garbage still accumulated at the base of their driveway, but at least they weren't fishing it out of their pond, which they felt was better for the environment in the long run.
And the Belgian block curb looks like it extends all the way down past the pond. It's hard to tell on this drawing, on this survey.
All right, so I'm looking here, here's the Belgian block curbing, right? So it's you know, it just falls
Right.
short of being their entire
Okay.
property, but here, Noyak Road is down here, right? And so again, as runoff comes down Maple Road, or it's Maple Lane, right? It was sort of filtering this way with the topography into the pond.
Okay. Now, tell me about the Belgian block curb that is on the applicant's property.
Sure, it demarcates the paved driveway, and that's up over here.
And you've proposed a French drain on each side of the driveway, and does that Belgian block curb allow for water to migrate from the driveway to the French drain?
I don't know, but one of the things that we're contemplating is replacing the surface of the driveway from asphalt paving to permeable pavers, which would increase permeability but still give the same stability you need to park a car. I would encourage all of the members to come and visit the site. The water table is very high, and so without something as stable as a permeable paver, just having pea gravel or, having a gravel driveway, you would just instantly sink. So it wouldn't be appropriate for something heavy like a vehicle, or they keep a boat on a trailer in their driveway in the winter months.
If you wish to do that, that should be part of this application.
Well, like I said, we're here to sort of lay everything before you guys and talk about what is fair and equitable in terms of resolving some of the issues. At this point, it's about the French drains. My recollection from when I was at the property is that Belgian block curbing is flush and at grade with the driveway. And Mr. Christopher is nodding his head.
Okay, is there anything else that we haven't talked about?
I don't think so, but I'm gonna let Marty correct me if I have left something
Okay,
off.
what I've got down on my list is the shower, the deck, the drainage place set in place, the Belgian block curbing, and the buffer.
And you've seen the photo with the shower head. There
Yeah.
are, I believe, are there even faucets anymore?
I don't think we need to spend much time on that.
All right, thank you.
Good evening, Marty Schick,
Yes.
environmental analyst for the town. There is a preliminary advisory report on file dated February 4, 2022. The applicant had requested many postponements of the board's review for this application. That's the reason why it's taken this long to schedule and hold a public hearing. As indicated by the applicant, the application has been made in order to legalize various project modifications. The original application had actually been submitted in 1996. My records show that the prior permit was issued on June 11th of 1997. As indicated by the applicant, the permit at that time had allowed for various additions to the residence which were not built, and also a deck whose footprint was approximately 1,200 square feet. The plans were modified in that the applicant has constructed 491 square feet of residential decks, and there are two different deck areas. There's a northerly elevated deck with two sets of steps, and westerly at grade or near grade deck. The decks are located at the close point 20 to 25 feet from wetlands. As this board knows, code recommends that a minimum setback of 100 feet be established for developed properties for construction. So because of the constraints of the property, the applicant is having to seek very significant relief from the required setbacks. Recall that in '96, the wetland law was somewhat different, as it subsequently got amended in 2001, when many of the standards became more stringent, than they perhaps were back in '96 when the original application was reviewed. As indicated by the applicant and summarized by the applicant, the advisory report on file provides a very lengthy history, not only with respect to permits and approvals from this board, but also with regards to various notices of violation, and fairly extensive communications back and forth between my office and the landowners in order to resolve the outstanding issues. As indicated by the applicant, the required covenant was not initially filed, but was subsequently recorded with the county on November 1st in 2019 in order to establish the original required buffer, which extended 10 feet landward of a former wetland line. As indicated by the applicant, many of the communications centered on concerns that the landowners had about various trees on the property, primarily within the flooded wetlands. Some the landowners had asked that they be allowed to address tree damage and or to prune or cut back any trees that might pose a risk in terms of property damage or endanger their safety. As is customary for my office, I think we worked well with the landowners in terms of addressing their immediate concerns over the years regarding various trees within close proximity to the house whose health had declined over the years or had been damaged by storms. When this application was filed, and it was done again in order to address the project modifications that had not received authorization from this board, notwithstanding my many visits to the subject property in the past, I more recently returned to the site and found that the wetlands were more extensive than previously flagged way back when the original application was filed and the original buffer was established. So what you're seeing on the current survey, and you should be looking at the survey, which is dated June 29, 2023. You're looking at that latter updated wetland boundary that I flagged on January 28, 2022. The revisit to the property not only revealed that that a large portion of the rear yard was recovering to wetlands, but that there were still some outstanding issues that had to be addressed, including removal of unauthorized wire fence within the previously required wetland buffer. There was the need to do some property maintenance with regards to the storage of various debris and materials on the north side of the garage. The original permit back in '96 had required that the landowner install drainage, and has since been described by the applicant they have now come forward with a plan that would call for installation of various subsurface drainage, mainly trench drains or French drains, in order to alleviate some of the runoff situation. The driveway, as indicated, is currently paved. It descends gradually to the road, so the runoff issues yet need to be addressed, as there are also wetlands on the opposite side of Maple Road. So I'm happy to hear that in addition to the updated drainage plans, the applicant may be entertaining converting that existing asphalt paved drive to stone pervious pavers. And as this board knows, there are all kinds of materials available on the market today in order to make that driveway pervious. The driveway does not necessarily have to be pea stone or gravel. There are many different types of pervious pavers that can be utilized. There is also grasscrete. There are other options that would provide the support for vehicles in the drive. The property is not only marked by a flooded red maple hardwood swamp to the rear and the ponds to the south of the residence, but there are also some very large trees landward of the wetlands. To the immediate south of the one-story dwelling on the property. I have indicated in the report that as the applicant is amenable to addressing any property maintenance issues and installing drainage and removing outdoor shower, that I have no issue with legalizing the modified decks at this site. However, I do think there is a need to revisit the former buffer plan. One of the reasons for that is if you look at the survey, and as alluded to by the applicant, the wetlands are now extending into a portion of that originally envisioned upland buffer landward of wetlands. Now, when I issued the report, I initially provided a sketch dated January 28, 2022 to the applicant, showing what I felt was appropriate in terms of needed buffer expansion. Initially, I had recommended that the playground equipment be removed, as the equipment is within close proximity to wetlands. I had asked that the applicants commit to protecting the large trees at the side, especially to the west and the south of the residence. The initial sketch that I provided was completed prior to the applicant having my updated wetland boundary flag. So it was not until this year that we received the final updated survey showing the reflect wetland boundaries and plans with respect to accommodating drainage. So acknowledging that initially I had to work off a field sketch, what I've prepared for review by the board and the applicant tonight is a revised sketch showing the recommended, the buffer expansion that I'm recommending at this There are copies of these drawings in the files on the wall, links on as well.
We have copies.
Oh, that's the copy.
So
You have the copies?
These are the same?
It's the same.
Oh,
if,
Yep.
what I'm basically looking for the applicant to do is to tighten up the buffer in the backyard. The rear yard area doesn't provide any usable area in terms of establishing lawn. The primary lawn, of course, on the roadside of the house and to the south of the house. The area that I'm recommending be taken in as additional buffer is kind of a meadow mix of moss, some sparse lawn grasses, sedges. It's a very damp or moist area. It's heavily shaded. So it is an area that is likely to succeed to wetlands over time. The house is actually positioned a little bit higher, and the roadside of the house is higher. So that area is high and dry. So the sketch which I just provided to the applicant, and I don't know if you have some extra copies there, because they only have one copy, or they have some extra copies. So this is a revision to my earlier recommended buffer, and then it allows the playground equipment to stay on the property. The initial part of the buffer, which backs up to the rear of the garage, would remain the same, but then the buffer expands only slightly, but more, but tighter around the west end and southerly perimeters of the house. With the recommended expansion of buffer, you could see that the setbacks, the width of the buffer would still be minimal. If you look at that northwest area, close to the playground equipment and decks, with this recommended buffer expansion, the buffer would only provide a width of 15 feet. It widens a little bit to 17 feet, keeping, as is customary for this board to require, keeping a 5-foot setback off the at-grade or near-grade rear deck. It then, because of the constraints of the property, narrows to a buffer of 10 feet or 10 to 12 feet, goes back down to 10 feet, landward of the wetlands. To the south of the residence, there is an opportunity to widen that buffer a little bit more so that the existing buffer in combination with the recommended buffer at its absolute widest would be 24 feet, which of course is far shy of the buffer of 75 feet that's recommended by code in order to ensure that the wetland values and benefits are protected. As indicated on all these surveys, the applicant has of course offered to covenant as buffer the uplands on the opposite side of the pond areas. So the buffer as, the revised buffer as being recommended will not only offer better protection for the wetlands, but for the large trees that I had the applicant survey as well. As indicated by my advisory report and confirmed here, I support legalization of the modified decks on this site. I support the drainage plan, and in the event that the applicant elects to remove the pavement and go with the pervious paver plan, that'll be even better. The applicant is correct in indicating that the Belgian block that was installed in the road right-of-way was signed off on by the former highway superintendent. And the other cleanup items are being addressed by the applicant. As most of the majority of the area that I'm showing in this recommended buffer sketch is in natural vegetation right now. I am not asking for any active native planting. The area to the south of the house is more of a maintained lawn in that area, but I've also recommended that the buffer be established simply by discontinuance of mowing in that area and allowance for natural vegetative succession. Conditions of the property, with the exception of the landward extension of wetlands, have remained quite static in that to the west of the house, the heavy shade canopy has pretty much prevented any understory shrub growth. So we're really looking at a moist to wet meadow area back there, which will likely remain in that condition without any management of vegetation. The area to the south, if that buffer was expanded, would simply, it's poor soils, but it would simply grow up in grasses. And again, a good portion of that is shaded. As you can see, the expanded buffer as drawn avoids encroachment with regards to the existing cesspools. Was revised to allow the play set to remain as desired by the applicant, and does provide a sufficient amount of area around the residence for safe access and maintenance. So tonight I'm simply asking that this board and the applicant consider expanding the buffer consistent with my drawing, covenant that buffer as well. With those mitigative measures, I would support issuance of a permit, legalizing the various improvements at the property, and putting to final resolution the many outstanding issues that I've tried to address with the applicant over the last 10 or more years.
Marty, I know this is a minor issue. I know the big issue here is the buffer. It's just, I don't understand it. What's the issue with the shower?
I think the applicant already agreed to remove the shower. I don't even think the shower is operational.
Huh?
It's
Yeah, but
just a spigot.
Why does he have to remove it? That's what I'm asking.
It's,
Doesn't matter.
It matters to me. You gotta have an outdoor shower. Why is that an issue, Marty?
well, the location of the shower is an issue because it's virtually in wetlands. It's
Okay,
just a couple feet from
that's what I
wetlands.
thought, okay.
So any
I mean, they could
shampoos,
move the shower
any
someplace
soaps are just gonna go right into the wetland area. And these are flooded wetlands, so it would contaminate the water. It does pose issues in terms
Sure.
of wildlife. This is an area this is a freshwater wetland system that has a lot of great diversity, is rich in amphibian and other wildlife, many birds. So we want to make sure that the sanctity of that area is preserved. But I think The applicant has offered to remove the shower,
Yeah,
so it's
no,
a
I-
non-issue.
That's what Harry just told me.
Okay.
Oh, no.
All right, thank you.
So Martha,
All right.
did you want to say something before I start to talk?
I think that we'd like to submit just a couple more visuals into the record for you to look at. And I think that what I will is let you talk and I'll respond. I have a couple things I want to say, but I don't want to
Um,
change your current train of thought.
Here's my current train of thought.
Thank you.
First, to the applicant, thank you for not building out the extent that you could have years ago. That makes the property more environmentally friendly. In spite of that, don't interpret that as being an environmentally friendly property, because there's a lot going on here that is way closer to sensitive things that we normally approve. But that's water over the dam. That's history. It's done. We're gonna take where we are right now and move forward. What are we gonna do now? And you've applied for several different things. I would say, I'm gonna say a few things, and I'm gonna give you some of my thoughts for the board as well as for the applicant. And then I want the board to authenticate what I'm saying, offer something else, or just comment. Let's go through step by step. Shower, check, no problem. Deck, check, no problem. The drainage, check, no problem. The playset, I would say leave that in place. You want it there. There's not many places to put it there. There's worse things about this property than the playset, and I don't think that's gonna be a significant issue. The Belgian block, assuming it is at grade, as you have testified, I don't see a problem with that. If you do want to change that to pavers, that would be sweet. Highly recommended. We don't normally allow, if you came before us with a new application to put a paved driveway there, we would not approve that. So when you talk that way of possibly changing that to a pavers, I would say, yeah, absolutely, go do that. So let's cut to the chase. We're talking about the buffer in this application. There's really nothing else of any consequence. And I'm gonna throw a proposal out to the board and to the applicant. And that is, essentially, there's some administrative stuff that you know about, that Marty, that you do with all these things that we didn't do back then. We'll do all that stuff, but, the buffer itself, Marty has drawn a buffer there that you don't like. Understandably, it does, come close to, areas that you're currently using in other ways. But right now, the existing buffer does not meet the conditions for issuance of a permit. We cannot approve this the way it is, because you have, there's areas of the wetlands that is not protected. So, my thinking is that the wetland buffer needs to be redrawn from the current new line that we see on the survey. And when we look at that current new line, it's likely that that current new line occurred because there was a buffer there that allowed it to occur. That's one of the benefits of a buffer. Having a buffer around the wetland allows it to migrate, because in many properties, the buffer is back where it is because of human activities that have forced it back there. So it's good to allow it to migrate, but we can't allow it to migrate unless we have a buffer. I'm proposing that you establish a 10-foot buffer along the edge of the wetland boundary, where part of it means that you don't change the buffer at all because it already is 10 feet. But there are some places where you will need to change it. If you do that, we will still meet the New York State fire requirement of leaving 10 feet around the house, in this case about 11 feet at the closest point, by my measure, and that's at the corner, the southwest corner of the house. But it will restrict your activities on the west side by a few feet in places and almost nothing in other places.
All right.
Now, I'm gonna throw that out, that's my thinking, that's my suggestion, but I don't run the board. The board speaks for themselves. I wanna hear their take on it and your take on it to see if we can put this to bed.
If it would be all right, I'd like to make a couple comments on what you just said, Harry, but also some of the things that Marty discussed before the board starts talking. And one of them is that, I think there is this sort of philosophical moment, right? Because you impose buffers to protect the wetlands vegetation, and over time, if things are doing what they're supposed to do, those wetlands will recover and they'll migrate landward. And on this particular property, if you leave it alone for a season, you will have wetlands vegetation popping up. I visited in early spring, and I could see the skunk cabbage wanting to come up everywhere, right? And Marty has spoken to it being a flooded wetland and everything else. And in this case, we're seeing that my client did the right thing. The wetlands boundary has moved further landward. What I want to bring up, though, is that while standards may have been different in 1996, they were not different in 2018 when the property to the north, which is the exact same wetland system and actually owned by the same family, just two siblings who don't happen to get along with each other, this board actually legalized as-built construction of over 200 and some odd square feet of decking that was only 18 feet from the wetlands boundary. Here we are much further than that. And they were able to preserve a significant amount of their yard, and their buffer was only 10 feet. So this is where I sort of bring in that idea of what is equitable here. And I know that this board constantly will always say that every property is unique and different, but when you're adjacent and you're part of the same wetland system, I think that's worth at least looking in terms of what this board did 5 years ago. Because that was under the current standards of Chapter 325. Next door on, I forget if is it 18 or 19 Maple? 19 Maple, which is also, I think that, we probably want to take some time to discuss the expanded buffer. I'd also like to hear the board's thoughts on whether or not this expanded buffer is needed in the sense that, the backyard is clearly where the Christophers spend their time. They enjoy this wetland very much. In fact, Nicholas, if you could come up for a second.
If I can just give one clarification in what I just said.
Sure.
That 10 feet, in my thinking, that I didn't say before, is the starting place.
So measured from the current wetlands boundary.
No, from the current, that's a starting place from the current wetland boundary. Any further numbers should be greater than 10. I am not really interested in having a conversation for less than 10.
All right. Well, that's sort of a line in the sand.
I want to just express where I'm thinking.
Okay. I think that I'd like to get the board's comments, and then we probably would need to adjourn so that we could plot it out, see if, stake it out to see if it is something that's feasible for the Christophers to live with. But let me get comments from the rest of the board in terms of, again, because we're talking about legalizing a significantly smaller project than what was originally authorized to be built.
Let the board, any comments from the board?
Yeah, I think what the chairman has presented to you is fair and equitable, and I believe you should give it some serious thought. Because there is a buffer required here, and there will be a buffer if you want to go forward. So, as I said, I think this is a generous proposal, and it's fair and equitable. It's not what you want, but it is fair and equitable. So I would not linger too long.
I do agree as well.
Marty, just wait, Marty, wait a second. Hey, Zeb, anything?
I agree as well, Harry.
Okay, go ahead.
But he's gonna bring in next door, no.
Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. I just wanted to offer some clarity, as the applicant mentioned, the board's requirements on the abutting property to the north. You know, I don't have a survey of that property, but what I do have is, we, as we typically look to make buffers, the scope of buffers and width of buffers contiguous, one of the, let's see, yeah, the abutting neighbor had indicated that our buffer was actually
Not necessary. This is
different
not
than what you
necessary.
just handed up.
Not necessary.
This is the property to the immediate north?
Yep.
All right, well,
Well, the abutting neighbor is not this application, and it really doesn't pertain here. We may have had other factors going on in that one, or may not, but we're looking at years of other applications and being consistent. 10 feet is a very small buffer, that it's very rare that we approve less than 10 feet. And there needs to be a compelling reason that you provide for us to go less than 10 feet. And I haven't a clue what you might come up with to do that. And
Well,
that's
I
what
just
I
wanted
said
to-
what I did.
I'm sorry, I wanted to offer one last comment, based upon the survey that was just handed to me. The buffer to the north is considerably larger than 10 feet, where that property is proximate to this property. There's, it narrows to 10 feet or less further north, but it's showing a much wider buffer than 10 feet, so, you know, the circumstances, so
Okay,
I don't know that
so-
that extent of relief was actually granted for the adjacent property.
So what we can do is, I'm gonna ask if anyone in the public wants to speak. We can adjourn this to a later date. You can come back and, after you mull it over, and we can discuss it further.
Or you could discuss it now, and we could bring the meeting to, bring the application to a
This-
closing.
Actually, it should go back to them, I guess.
That's totally your choice.
Kevin, is there anyone in the public who wants to speak in this application? Any hands raised?
No, they're not.
And since the entire public I'm looking at is the applicant and people representing the applicant, when would you like to adjourn this to?
Or would you like to adjourn it?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We would like to adjourn it because I think that I'd like some time to talk to my clients as well, and to determine what they want to do. I think that it would make sense to adjourn it, Matt, at least a month?
Yeah.
I mean, if we have to get sort of surveys revised and everything else, I think that even a month would be cutting it short, knowing.
We don't need surveys to move forward on this. The survey, we gotta get the concept approved, and then the survey can be developed.
Well, I think we would also like some time to
Thank you, Jim.
discuss it with Marty, so I would ask for at least a 1-month adjournment.
We have October 11th and October 25th.
Let's do October 25th.
Motion to adjourn to October the 26th,
Second?
25th.
25th, sorry.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. The next application is A022054, Paul Basic and Liza Gallo. The applicant requests adjournment to October 11th, 2023. Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak in this application? Kevin, anybody with a hand raised?
Motion to adjourn to October 11th, 2023.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And now we'll go back to A019131, Lynn Prue Revocable Trust.
Kevin, can you bring Mr. Downs into the,
Yeah, he's joining right now.
thank you.
Hello? Hello?
Hello, we
Dennis.
can hear you, Dennis.
Oh, thank you. Okay, Dennis Downs, 49 Crescent Street, Sago, New York, attorney for the applicant. Last month, I sent in a revised concept that had been used, being used historically now in North Haven with these bluff cases, where they're putting in revetments, trying to maintain the bluff and eliminate the erosion. And it's worked very well. The case I gave you was the first one that was ever decided in North Haven using, where the village hired their own engineer out of Woods Hole, Massachusetts, and they spent about 2 years and came up with a plan for how to preserve the bluff, maintain the nourishment on the beach, and at the same time give the applicant some consolation that they're not going to continue to have erosion. Since we started this case, well, since it was started before my time, they've already lost 5.5 feet of land. And according to the engineers, they're losing 1.1 feet of land every year. And we would assume that's going to continue over the next 20 years. I'm aware of Marty's concerns. I don't think putting individual boulders spread out across the 300 feet of frontage is going to stop the wave action and stop the erosion. It's just going to go over those stones and continue to pull the sand down. Now, I think what the concern of the town is that to maintain the beach, that you maintain the nourishment of the beach, and we can do that by having the revetment with fill on top of it, cobble and sand, and when 50% of that has been washed away, the homeowner is contractually obligated with the town to renourish it. And that means including renourishing the beach, depending upon what the board may want to do at any given time. In the North Haven, what they've done is every 5 years, they submit a survey to the planning board, and the planning board goes and makes a visit, and they determine whether or not they have to replenish not only the rock revetment, but also the beach. And it seems to be working very well in that community. Noyak Bay is pretty much like Peconic Bay, or Little Peconic Bay. And so I would think that there's a big comparison between the two systems. That's really pretty much all I wanted to say. If there's a consensus that it's something that's doable, I'll get all the surveys redrawn to show where the revetment would go. I'll have the engineers determine the size and mass of the rocks that we would be using, as well as the repose of the bluff. So how high up we would have to go. And I would recommend putting a cap at the top so it would catch sand as it comes down. And then we would revegetate the entire bluff above the cap to make sure that bluff is stabilized. Lost the picture. All right.
Thank you, Dennis. We typically have a plan that's presented with sufficient time for our staff to examine it, evaluate it, and offer a report. We're missing that time right now, so I hear what you say. I don't know what else we can do tonight except just adjourn it, awaiting something more concrete in what you're proposing. You talked about concept, but we
Yeah, I have no objection to that. I mean, we've gone this far. A couple more months is not going to be life-threatening to anybody. I would like to meet with Marty and show him some photographs of what we've been able to do in North Haven, which I've had more experience than anywhere else. And if he'd like, I can get him permission to go on sites and he can check the revetments and how they're working, or if they're not working. But vegetation is very important from the top of the revetment going to the top of the bluff, which is pretty steep on this one. There's a very high bluff here, and vegetating all that sand, in my opinion, is necessary for that bluff to be stabilized, so it doesn't continue to wash out.
Okay, Marty, you want to speak?
Good evening, again, Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. Although the applicant had submitted a two-page description of his concept in the end of June, I was anticipating that a drawing would be provided in order to allow for adequate review and feedback. We never received that drawing, and as indicated, that's essential in order to proceed with the application review. That being said, I did send a quick email to the applicant where, in addition to indicating that it's crucial that we have a drawing, I expressed a number of concerns. What the applicant is looking to do, this property is only very lightly developed. As you can see in looking at the area, there is one small to moderate residence on the property. The rest of the property is primarily wooded and extends all the way back to Noyak Road. There is a pre-existing gabion or wire baskets of rock along a significant portion of the beachfront, which shows on the applicant's survey, which, as expected, has resulted in erosion of the beach, seaward of the gabion, and a lowering of the bay bottom, only increasing the risk of erosion. While I support the removal of the gabions,
Still can't hear you.
I cannot support construction of about 300 linear feet of new
So you
revetment.
got enough,
This property, again, is characterized not only by an existing gabion, but by a natural bluff and beach. The natural bluff and beach would be destroyed by construction of the revetment, which will mean that in time, the majority of beach, if not all the beach, will be lost. And you'll have high water coming up to the seaward side of the revetment, like you have alongside the gabions on the rest of the property. So by constructing the revetment, it would result in a significant loss of beach and adverse impact to the existing wetlands and wetland-dependent wildlife that use natural beaches. The bluff system, as this board knows, plays a critical role in supplying sediment to the beach and in enhancing the ability of that beach to recover. Bluff erosion is a natural process. It's to be expected. And when the bluff erodes, what it does is it leaves a lot of sediment on the beach, which provides some opportunity for that beach to rebuild. When you have a forested bluff and you have some trees that fall along the bluff face, it can be absolutely critical to leave those trees in place because they actually build up the toe of fulcrum for the more vertical bluff face by catching sediment and allowing additional vegetation to grow. So in the interim, while we go through this process, or where there are any fallen trees on the bluff face, I would recommend that the applicant leave those trees in place. Something that is particularly critical here is that there is no emergency at this property whatsoever. The existing home is located about 125 feet landward of the gabions and greater than 150 feet from this section of eroded bluff. So the home is in no way threatened at this time. I don't see any immediate need to harden this entire beach and fortify the beachfront. So what I'm recommending is consistent with discussions that were previously had with regards to this application, is that the applicant entertains softer solutions, including a combination of beach bluff restoration, native revegetation, and creation of widely scattered naturalized boulder fields. The DEC should be lobbied to allow some of those boulders to be placed in the open water. The reason scattered large boulders of various sizes can be very effective in stemming significant erosion is as the waves come in, their energy is not only diffused when they hit the boulders, it's diffused in various directions, lowering the amount of surge energy that comes in, which would erode the base of the bluff line. So the applicant has offered to construct a revetment, to deposit sand on the bluff revetment, then to revegetate that revetment with beach grass or other native vegetation, and then to monitor the erosion. And when the loss of sand that was placed atop the revetment exceeds a certain threshold, to come back and replenish that area with sand. This has been tried with other applications many years ago. And number one, it's rarely successful because when you have a large engineered stone revetment right in the face of those incoming waves, there's really nothing to hold that sand and cobble together because the revetment ends up acting as a vertical wall. It lowers the beach and bay bottom seaward of it, allowing for even higher waves and a stronger surge to come in. The other thing is, notwithstanding any commitment on part of the landowner to agree to a sand replenishment plan, what I have found is that it becomes cost prohibitive for the landowner to keep coming back every few years and bringing sand. Sand is not cheap. So this would place an enormous burden on the landowner. It would be a condition that's very difficult to enforce, and it's unnecessary, as the home at the present time is not threatened by erosion. So, notwithstanding the applicant's willingness to replenish the lost sand, it's an arrangement like that is not going to work. The revetment is going to be constructed, even if you replenish it a couple times, you're going to have to give up because you're not going to be able to keep putting sand on top of that large rock, and it just becomes absolutely cost prohibitive for the landowner. So I would not want to place that burden on the landowner. That being said, I look forward to the applicant's submittal of a drawing, and at that time I'll provide additional feedback to the applicant and to this board. Thank you.
Dennis, would you like to adjourn this to a later date?
Yeah, I would like to make one comment, though, if you don't mind. This property has been in the applicant's family.
Dennis,
since
we
the
can't hear
1940s.
you.
We're not getting sound.
Can't hear me, okay, let me just see.
That's good, now we can
Now I
hear you.
got it.
Oh, you can hear me? All right, thank you. So the property's been in the Freud family since the 1940s, and they've maintained this over 10-acre parcel, considering all the development pressure that's been going on in the Noyak area. And it's Ms. Freud's preference to keep it preserved as a 10-acre piece. She's the last of her bloodline. We don't know where this property's gonna go in the next 20, 30 years, depending upon her lifespan. So my prediction is 20 some odd years from now, this property's gonna get sold off and developed probably, unless she makes a generous gift to the town, which I don't know if that's ever gonna happen. But, so I think we have to give some thought to the fact that the land is probably gonna get developed sometime. The fact that the house is back far enough from the bluff was something that her father was smart in doing, knowing that there was gonna be some erosion, because he's the one that built the house. And, although there is no emergency right now, why should we wait until there is an emergency? Let's stabilize the bluff, preserve the property, and then hope for the best that there'll be some sort of, maybe a sale of development rights or something like that, so that land can be preserved as a 10-acre parcel. That's all I have to say right now, and I would like to meet with Marty if he's available in the next couple of weeks and go over photographs of stuff that we've done in North Haven, as well as, giving him new surveys and drawings that he can, address to the board.
Thank you, Dennis. When do you want to adjourn to?
Maybe a 2-month adjournment would be good.
November 15th?
That's fine, thank you.
Is there anyone in the public who'd like to speak in this application?
Motion to adjourn to November the 15th, 2023.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Marty's,
Time.
Marty's always available, Dennis, to meet, so, I mean, if you contact his office.
He's always been available to me, I just want to make sure he's okay with this,
Sure.
that's all.
All right, thank you, Dennis.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
We'll move on to the advisory reports for the ZBA 17 Bishop LLC.
Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. The advisory report relates to a pending variance application for a developed property at 17 Bishop Avenue in the hamlet of West Hampton. There are several recommended comments. First is that the planned residential improvements for
Don't
which
forget the
pyramid
minutes.
and side yard setback variances are being sought would occur at bulkheaded property fronting Beaver Dam Creek, where the town's wetland permitting jurisdiction is confined to 50 feet landward of the bulkhead. Second, based upon an August 31, 2023 Environment Division field assessment, existing wood deck, pergola, and mature trumpet vines would need to be removed. 3, stormwater dry wells need to be installed as roof runoff is currently being directed by downspouts onto the ground. 4, the Conservation Board had previously issued a letter of non-jurisdiction for construction of residential 2-story additions in September of 2020. However, the report goes on to indicate the survey that is currently before the ZBA is not consistent with the survey that received a letter of non-jurisdiction from this board. Next, it's indicating that while the proposed structures themselves may be at or greater than 50 feet land with a bulkhead, the needed excavation and backfilling of the foundation, together with roof overhang construction, will occur within 50 feet of surface waters and thus requires a town wetland permit. The report goes on to further note that as of today's date, we have not yet received that needed wetland permit application. The next comment requests some clarity with regards to the intentions of the landowner, because separate from the survey, the landowner provided to the ZBA a site plan which calls for the establishment of a 50-foot wide naturally vegetated wetland non-disturbance, non-fertilization buffer. But that's not shown on the filed survey, so we need to know whether or not these mitigative measures are being offered. Next, it's indicated that the plans need to call for installation of a continuous line of trenched in-staked siltation barrier on the downslope edge of the proposed land disturbance area, as well as landward of any planned wetland buffers prior to commencement of demolition and construction. Silt barrier needs to be maintained, repaired, and replaced as often as necessary to ensure proper function until all disturbed areas are permanently vegetated and stabilized. Sediments trapped by the screen need to be removed away from the screen to an approved upland location before the screen is removed. 36-inch posts or stakes need to be driven a minimum 16 inches into the ground and set no more than 10 feet apart.
Motion to send these comments to the ZBA.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Board of Trustees, 370 Fowler Street.
This application relates to plan which is currently pending before the trustees to construct an elevated walkway extending from an oceanfront residence to the ocean beach. The report indicates that when I inspected the property on August 24th, 2023, I found that an extensive part of the back dune and dune crest had recently been cleared of natural vegetation, with that disturbance occurring seaward of the coastal erosion hazard area line and west of the proposed elevated walkway without requisite coastal erosion management permits. Accordingly, the site plan and survey before the trustees needs to be revised to show the full extent of clearing and site disturbance, followed by filing of a town coastal erosion management permit application and dune restoration plan. Second, the report indicates that the planned elevated walkway should be built with ADA compliant, 60% light penetrating open grade wheelchair accessible decking, as that has become the standard for oceanfront properties today.
Motion to send these comments to the Board of Trustees.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The administrative wetland permits are in your packets. Conservation Management Plan and Easement Interpretation R 0220276, Adrian Cheney. And the applicant has requested a postponement to 9/27.
Motion to postpone to 9/27.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution conditional approval. A 023009, Ellen Rubin. Any discussion?
Move to issue?
Second.
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit approval be granted to Ellen Rubin for the proposed project on the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 023035, Anthony Prudenti. Any discussion?
Move to issue?
Second.
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit approval be granted to Anthony Prudenti for the proposed project on the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 023038, 34 Jagger LLC. Any discussion?
Move to issue? Second?
Resolved that a conditional wetland approval is granted to 34 Jagger LLC for the proposed project upon the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 023039, 34 Jagger LLC. Any discussion?
Move to issue.
Second.
Resolved that a conditional wetland approval is granted to 34 Jagger LLC for the proposed project upon the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 023044, Bayberry Holding LN LLC. Any discussion?
Move to issue.
Move to issue?
Second.
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit approval granted to Bayberry Holding LN LLC for the proposed project upon the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Preliminary review signature determination, A 022007, Todd Cohen and Jill Cohen, the applicant, request postponed to September 27th, 2023.
Motion to postpone to September 27, 2023.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 022082, Erlinda Bildner.
Motion,
Applicant postpones to same date. September
motion to
27th.
postpone to September 27, 2023.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 023022, Jerome Savadier. Applicant postpones to September 27th, 2023.
Motion to postpone to September 27, 2023.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution issue modification, CB 22020, 199 Georgian Lane LLC.
Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. This application relates to property which recently received a permit from this board for residential redevelopment. The permit was conditioned upon establishment of a covenanted wetland preservation area, covenanted naturally vegetated wetland, non-disturbance, non-fertilization buffer, and a supplemental non-covenanted native landscape landward of the buffer. The application was made as a landowner has an interest in replacing some of the vegetation at the property. Some of the trees are in failing health. There is crowding of some vegetation. There are invasives. There is some significant non-native vegetation. Did have an opportunity to look at the entirety of the area and have been working very closely with the landscape architects on an appropriate plan for the site. We just received an excellent plan that's consistent with my field recommendations. So there is a resolution before you to allow for a modification of the existing permit in order to allow for various vegetation management and replacement work at the site.
Motion issued a modification.
Second.
Resolved that that a wetland permit modification be issued to 199 Georgian Lane LLC for the proposed project upon the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? HCB 2123, Matthew Lucas.
This application relates to a recent permit that was issued by this board in order to allow for residential redevelopment at a property at Bayview Drive in the hamlet of Noyak. The applicant had made some changes in construction. They had sought a certificate of wetland compliance. We went out, looked at the site, and reported back that they needed to get the changes authorized by this board, and that they needed to complete various remedial measures as required by the original permit. The applicant has agreed to appropriately address the outstanding issues. So this is a resolution to modify the existing permit in order to allow the applicant to complete the required remediation and to file again for a certificate of wetland compliance, so they can subsequently apply for a certificate of occupancy.
Motion issued modification.
Second.
Resolve that a wetlands permit modification be issued to Matthew Lucas for the proposed project upon the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? CB 23047, Jamie Bennett and Jeremy Bennett.
This application relates to a recent permit that was issued on August 25, 2023, in order to allow for renovation of an existing deteriorated residence and various improvements at the site. The permit was conditioned upon establishment of a covenanted wetland preservation area, very expansive, naturally vegetated buffer, as well as upon very active restoration and reclamation. The initial plan that was approved called for retaining the existing one-story house. The applicant is looking now to add a second story within the same footprint. They did have an engineer look at the house to make sure the structural integrity of the house is sound and can support the second floor addition. Second floor addition will not increase the bedroom count, and the applicant is already installing an IAOWTS. So the allowance now for a second floor addition in place within the same footprint as the existing dwelling is unlikely to result in any new adverse wetland impacts. As such, there is a resolution before you in order to approve the necessary modifications to the existing permit to allow for this addition to the dwelling.
Motion issue modification.
Second.
Resolved that a wetlands permit modification be issued to Jamie Lee Bennett and Jeremy Bennett for the proposed project on the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution to transfer conditional approval A 022098, Diane Neistat and Alexander Ham.
Motion to approve the transfer of the conditional approval.
Second.
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit approval be granted to Diane Nastad and Alexander Ham for the proposed project on the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Now let's go back to the beginning with the minutes. We are able to vote on one of the minutes, the first one, but not the second one, so we'll do what we can. Is there a motion to accept the July 26, 2023 minutes as written and or amended?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And we'll try for the other one next meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you all.
On July 26th, I'd like to